The glass on the kitchen counter. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the Martinez household as 12-year-old Diego slumped into the kitchen chair, his muddy soccer cleats dangling from his tired feet. His shoulders sagged under the weight of another disappointing practice, and his usually bright eyes seemed clouded with frustration. "Rough practice today, Mijo?" his father, Carlos, asked gently as he poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the counter. The glass filled slowly, the clear liquid rising steadily until it reached exactly halfway. Diego barely glanced up. "I'm terrible, Papa." "Just terrible." His voice cracked with the emotion he'd been holding back all afternoon. Coach Rivera made us watch highlights of professional players again today. Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar. They're like magic on the field. And then there's me, tripping over my own feet. Carlos set his half-filled glass down and studied his son's defeated posture. He remembered when Diego first discovered soccer just over a year ago, how his eyes had lit up watching a World Cup match on television. The boy had begged for cleats, a ball, lessons, anything to be part of that beautiful game. "Tell me what happened today," Carlos said, pulling up a chair beside his son. Diego's hands clenched into fists. "Everything. I missed 3 easy passes. My shots went wide of the goal, every single one. And when we scrimmaged, I couldn't even get past Tommy Rodriguez, and he's smaller than me." The words tumbled out like water from a broken dam. "Coach says I need to believe in myself, but how can I when I see what real players can do?" Carlos picked up his glass and took a thoughtful sip. "Diego, look at this glass. What do you see?" His son glanced over with confusion. "It's half empty." "What does that have to do with anything?" "Interesting," Carlos mused. "But let me ask you something. This morning, this glass was completely empty, sitting in our cabinet. I just filled it with water from the pitcher. So tell me, is it half empty or is it half full?" Diego frowned, not understanding where his father was going with this. "I guess." "Both?" "But Papa, this isn't about glasses." "Bear with me, son," Carlos interrupted gently. "You see, the difference between half empty and half full isn't just about the amount of water. It's about the story of how it got that way." He stood up and walked to the sink, completely emptying the glass before placing it back on the counter. "If I had drunk half of this water, then yes, it would be half empty, something was taken away, diminished. But I didn't drink from it. I filled it. I added water to something that had nothing. So it's half full, growing, building up." Diego looked puzzled but intrigued despite himself. "I still don't get what this has to do with soccer, Papa." Carlos sat back down, his eyes warm with understanding. "Mijo, you've been looking at your soccer skills like this glass is half empty." You compare yourself to players who have been perfecting their craft for 20, 30 years and you feel diminished. But you're forgetting your own story. He reached over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a worn notebook. Diego's eyes widened as he recognized it. His father's journal where he kept track of Diego's progress. "Let me tell you a different story," Carlos began, flipping through the pages. 13 months ago, you couldn't even kick a ball in a straight line. Remember your first day of practice? You were so nervous you wore your shin guards on the wrong legs. Despite his gloom, Diego's mouth twitched slightly at the memory. Carlos continued. "Look here, week 1, you wrote that you couldn't juggle the ball even once. By week 4, you managed 3 touches. By month 3, you were up to 25. He turned the page. "Remember when you first tried to dribble around cones? You knocked every single one down. But look at this entry from last month. You completed the entire course without touching a single cone." Diego leaned in, his interest growing. I forgot about that. "And your first scrimmage," Carlos chuckled. "You were so afraid of the ball that you ran away from it whenever someone passed it to you. Your teammates called you El Fantasma, the ghost, because you disappeared whenever the action got close." "That was so embarrassing," Diego groaned, but he was smiling now. "But then came your first goal." Carlos's voice grew excited as he found the right page. 3 months ago against the Blue Eagles. You remember? That beautiful shot from outside the penalty box that sailed right into the top corner. Coach Rivera said it was one of the best goals he'd seen from a beginner. Diego's eyes lit up for the first time that evening. The goalkeeper never even had a chance to move. Felt amazing. Exactly. Carlos slammed his hand on the table with enthusiasm. Your glass isn't half empty, Diego. It's half full and still filling. Every practice, every drill, every mistake you learn from is adding water to your glass. You're not losing skills, you're building them. But Papa, Diego's voice grew small. Again, when I watch those professional players, I feel so incomplete. Like I'll never be good enough. Carlos stood up and walked back to the counter. He picked up the pitcher and began pouring more water into his glass until it was completely full. Diego, even Messi's glass wasn't always full. There was a time when he was shorter than his teammates, when doctors said he might never grow tall enough to be a professional player. His glass looked pretty empty then, didn't it? Diego nodded slowly. But he kept training, kept improving, kept adding to his skills. And you know what? Your glass doesn't need to look exactly like Messi's glass to be valuable. Every player has their own unique glass, their own way of being full. Carlos sat back down and pulled out his phone. "Let me show you something." He scrolled through his photos and found a video from Diego's recent practice. Watch this. On the screen, Diego saw himself executing a perfect slide tackle, cleanly stealing the ball from an opponent before springing to his feet and launching a precise pass to a teammate. I did that. Diego's voice was filled with wonder. You did that, Carlos confirmed. And this. He showed another clip of Diego making a spectacular save during a goalkeeper rotation drill, diving full stretch to tip the ball around the post. And this. The third video showed Diego dribbling through a series of defenders with fluid, confident movements that surprised even him. Papa, when did I get good at those things? Diego asked, genuine amazement in his voice. Gradually, son. So gradually that you didn't notice because you were too busy comparing your glass to glasses that have been filling for decades. Carlos put his arm around his son's shoulders. You know what the real tragedy is? While you were focusing on how empty your glass looked compared to others, you were missing the miracle of watching it fill up. Diego was quiet for a long moment, processing his father's words. So, you're saying I should stop comparing myself to professional players? I'm saying you should recognize the difference between a glass that's being emptied and a glass that's being filled, Carlos replied. If your skills were getting worse, if you were losing abilities you once had, then yes, your glass would be half empty. But that's not what's happening, is it? Diego thought carefully. No. I guess I am getting better. It's just slow. The best things always are, Mijo. A tree doesn't grow into a giant overnight. A river doesn't carve the Grand Canyon in a year. And soccer players don't become legends without countless hours of seeing their glass slowly, steadily fill up. Carlos stood up and refilled his glass completely. Here's what I want you to try. For the next month, instead of comparing your current skills to Messi or Ronaldo, compare them to where you were a month ago. Keep track of the water being added to your glass, not how much room is still left at the top. Diego nodded, feeling a spark of hope igniting in his chest. What if I'm still not good enough for the team next season? Then we keep training, keep filling the glass. But Diego. Carlos looked directly into his son's eyes. You're already good enough. You're good enough to improve, good enough to try, good enough to fail and learn and grow. That's all any of us can be. The rain had stopped, and evening sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the half-full glass on the counter. Papa, Diego said quietly, will you help me start a new journal? One where I write down what I learned each day instead of what I did wrong. Carlos's face broke into a huge grin. I'd love nothing more, son. As they sat together at the kitchen table, creating Diego's new progress journal, the boy felt something shift inside him. The weight on his shoulders felt lighter, replaced by a growing excitement for tomorrow's practice. 3 weeks later, Diego bounded into the kitchen after practice, his face glowing with excitement. Papa! Papa! You'll never believe what happened today. Carlos looked up from his newspaper, smiling at his son's enthusiasm. Tell me everything. Coach Rivera picked me for the starting lineup for Saturday's big game. Diego could barely contain himself. And you know what else? I helped Jenny Martinez, the new girl who just joined our team. She was feeling terrible about her passing skills, and I showed her some drills that helped me improve. I told her about the glass story. Carlos felt his heart swell with pride. And what did you tell her? I told her that her glass wasn't half empty, it was half full and still filling. Just like mine. Diego grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it halfway with water from the pitcher. Look, Papa. Half full and getting fuller every day. As Diego headed upstairs to do his homework, Carlos remained in the kitchen, looking at the glass his son had left on the counter. The water caught the afternoon light, sparkling with possibilities and hope. The moral of the story: life is like filling a glass. When we're learning and growing, our glass eye. It's half full, not half empty. The difference lies in recognizing whether we're building up our abilities or losing them. When we focus on our progress rather than comparing ourselves to others, we discover that every day of improvement adds more water to our glass, making us not just better at what we do but better at believing in ourselves.